Welcome Math for Teachers 2 students. This is a video review of Lesson 3. These are our lesson goals. Please hit pause and read them, and if you've already done so in the overview, that's awesome. You can move forward. One of the great things about a video review is that you can hit pause as we're working on solutions together, and you will need a writing utensil and several pieces of paper. Okay, here we go. First things first, with Piaget. Below you're going to see a classic Piagetian task. It's a conservation task where you ask young children to consider which container holds more. So which do you think they'll pick? And think about why. No. Welcome Math for Teacher 2 students. This is a video review of Lesson 3. These are our lesson goals, and you may have already read through them with the overview of the lesson. If you have, great, and you can move on. If you haven't, take a few minutes, hit pause. That's the great thing about a video is you can hit pause at any point and then come back. You will also be directed to pause because you will need paper and a writing utensil throughout this. Consider the following classic Piagetian task, where you would ask a young child which container holds more. Which do you think that they'll pick and why? This is a conservation Piaget task. Okay, let's take a look. So most young children are used to attending to only one item at a time because of their work with counting and whole numbers. So in this case, you're thinking about a measuring fraction, let's just say a measuring strip, right? Could be a ruler, could be a strip. If we're looking here and we're looking at the measurement of this, let me pick a different color here. Let me do gray. Okay, so if we're looking at the measurement of this height is taller than the height of this container. But it doesn't mean the volume isn't the same, okay? But children are going to take it at face value. Now, the other thing that I'm noticing here with this illustration, and when you're creating slides, this is why you want to look at them, it really helpful if I had the image the same, right? So that you could see with these cylinders over here, the tall and the wide cylinders, you could see similarities, okay? All right. Another thing is that Piaget proposed that children's inability to conserve is due to their weakness in the way that children think during the preoperational stage. So weakness, remember they're growing, right? So they don't have that cognitive capacity yet to understand that the volume is the same. They're just simply looking at height. And this is preoperational stage, which is ages 2 to 6. Okay, the second slide I had already switched the image, but it's a good reason and a good reminder to make sure that you're reviewing your slides before presenting them. So a teacher tip here can be helpful to revisit and reinforce your own knowledge about various child development theories and other concepts you're teaching. This may or may not be to provide information to your students directly, but is a good reinforcement and reassuring factor for you to be able to be comfortable and confident teaching the math concepts. This is an article with several videos about the conservation tasks, and it shows you a pre-operational child and an operational child, which is the next step. Fractions. We know 3 is the, say it out loud, the numerator, because it's never on the bottom, n numerator. But more importantly, the definition is the number of measuring units. 4, the denominator down low, is the size of the measuring units. So when students get to fractions and fractional symbols, they're required to attend to the 2 items above, right? This is one reason that many children have difficulties with fractions. So consider the vocabulary that you're going to highlight and reinforce to your children. Hit pause here, take a look at the slide, and see what above that you would highlight as vocabulary that's important? Great. So 3 numerator number and 4 denominator size. Good to always highlight. Okay. Consider the vocabulary you will use to highlight and reinforce with your students. Yes, this is repetitive, but here, how else would you illustrate numerator and denominator? How else could you do that? I'm trying to do throughout the whole slides indicate my questions in bolded and italicized. So thinking about how else would you illustrate this? Here's another example. 3, the numerator of measuring units in red, and 4, a size of measuring units in green. These are contrasting colors. Red, green, blue, orange, purple, yellow. The opposites on the color wheel are what we consider contrasting colors. They help people, they bring attention to something, and they also help people focus. Okay, so thinking about those contrasting colors. Really, when you're presenting, your best color combinations are going to be red, green, blue, and orange, because yellow's tough to see, right? So you could do a purple, brown, might be a good alternative. Fractions. Now we're going to go and we're going to look at decimals. So if we consider the 2 decimals below, 0.8 and 0.08. Hit pause. Just draw a line down the middle of your page just for about 2 inches and write same and different on either side of that line. And think about what is the same and what is different. And then when you're ready, come back. Try to think of 2 same, 2 different. When you're ready, you can hit play again. Great. Welcome back. Right. So here at the top, you've seen that I already put 8 and I illustrated, type the word tenths. Okay. And I made that a bright blue. And here I used hundredths, 0.08. Hundredths is that place marking. And I made that a darker orange. That's another alternative. Rather than a brighter orange, use kind of a rusty orange. So what's the same and different? Let's see what we came up with. Same, they both illustrate decimals, both are less than 1, and both can be converted into fractions. Things that are the same, or the different, excuse me, tenths and hundredths, and one is smaller than the other. Okay, so again, here you can see that I carried down the tenths, the color of the text, the hundredths in the rust orange. One is smaller, hundredths, than the other, tenths. And if it's helpful to have a refresher, this is a really good Khan Academy video on place value with decimals. All right, so the meaning of the numerator and denominator is so important that your students understand, right? Know the definition, understand. Just not down low and down low, right? But they really, really understand. So the next few slides are going to go through in more detail to reinforce this with your children. If 10 circles below represent 2/5, then how would you represent 1? Okay, now notice down below, I separated here, and let's just illustrate for a second. If the numerator, the number of measuring units, is 2, and the denominator, the size of the measuring unit, is 5. Now what I did was I separated, and rather than just writing a short paragraph, I really tried to separate. I used separation of the phrasing, right? Which allows children to visually identify each component of what I'm teaching to them, right? You don't necessarily need to highlight, but that's one option. Okay, so if the numerator's, the number of measuring unit is 2, and the denominator, the size of the measuring unit, is 5, then 5/5 is 1 basic measuring unit. Okay, I'm seeing here. Okay, oops. Put you in the back. So let's first find the number of measuring units, which is 2. How could you illustrate this? Okay, so should have asked you to hit pause and do that. All right, so illustrate on your paper 5 circles, just randomly like this is illustrated. And if we're finding 2, then we're grouping them into 5s. Okay, but again, going back up here, our original question here is if 5 circles below represent 2/5, how many would represent 1? Okay, so let's keep going. What I'd like you to do is hit pause, and I want you to think about how you would represent this. Okay, so do that now. Hit pause, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, welcome back. Trying to get my stuff fixed here. Okay. All right, so you have your 10 circles representing 2/5. Remember, we had it circled 1 in green and 1 in blue. So we have 2 groups of 5. Now, just to eliminate some visual clutter, I'm going to get rid of this. And this is the beauty of PowerPoint slides or other technology that you use. And then I'm going to slide over. Okay, so for me, I like to have things in columns, right? It's visually easier for me to equate when I have columns or rows. So in this case, I did columns, and I actually took to represent this cluster, right? I took the green highlight and I made this column, and the blue circled and I made it this column, right? Let's get rid of this again. And then I know that 2 plus what is 5, 3. So I needed 3 more groups or columns to create 5/5. Right? So 2/5 plus 3/5 equals 5/5, which is 1. You can hit pause at any time and go back if that's helpful. If the rectangle below represents 3/4, then how would you represent 1? So what I'd like you to do now is I hit pause, illustrate 3 or 4 more rectangles on your paper, and do this illustration. Okay, so the initial rectangle, 3/4, 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. And then if we take it out, we now know that this is the approximate of another 4th. Let's do this. Oops. This, right? This box is the equivalent of 1/4. So I'm going to add about that same. So in here, I did the dot to dots to illustrate that. Great. So again, oops, if we come to our next slide, and this is another thing you just get used to it, right? The pace of doing this. So down at the bottom, I extended this even further. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 4/4 or 1. Okay, if the line segment below represents 5/6, then how would you represent 1? Let's look at this together. Right? And again, I'm using legit the technology, but I'm using the drawing tool instead of the perfect lines. I'm not, perfectly measuring. We don't have a ruler or another measuring unit. So 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5, 1/5 equals 5/5. And then if I'm trying to represent 1, I'm adding 1 more 5ths to create 5/5. Okay. Oh, I'm going to conclude this part 1 of lesson 3. There are about 7 more slides, but to be respectful of not cramming in too much, let's hit pause. Please come back and watch part 2.